If you heard a sudden intake of breath ripple through the audience at the Royal Variety Performance 2025, you weren't imagining it. Something happened on that stage, and more importantly, behind it, that jolted the entire royal watching world like a bolt of lightning. Why? Because for the first time in years, three of the most influential women connected to Princess Diana chose a side. Lady Kitty Spencer, Lady Eliza Spencer, Lady Amelia Spencer, Diana's glamorous, elegant, soft-spoken nieces. The women who carry her blood, her beauty, her grace, and her original family's legacy. They made a choice so unmistakable, so symbolic, and so emotionally charged that it left Prince Harry absolutely fuming. And the choice was this: they sided with Prince William. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Why? Why now? Why here? And why did it explode into such a seismic moment that people inside the event whispered about it, as if it were a political coup? That's the question no one has fully answered. Until now. Because once you look closely at what happened on the red carpet, the seating arrangement disaster, the tense glances, the whispered conversations, the stiff smiles, the awkward half-nods, and the moment backstage where one sentence froze Harry in place, you realize something. This wasn't accidental. It wasn't spontaneous. And it wasn't polite. It was deliberate. Have you ever sensed a family divide without anyone saying a word? That thick heaviness in the air? That coldness layered under formal smiles? That strange awareness that two people who once shared closeness are now barely tolerating each other's presence? Multiply that by 1,000. Then place it under stage lights, surrounded by cameras, royalty, celebrities, and more than 12 million live viewers. That's the emotional atmosphere the Spencer sisters walked into and transformed within minutes. But the real question remains, what pushed them to do it? And what exactly did Harry say, or do, or fail to do, that made his own cousins by blood align themselves with the brother he now publicly battles? Let's start with the moment everything changed. Picture the scene. William steps out of the royal car, the familiar poised figure, carefully controlled, shoulders squared, a man stepping into duty. Then the Spencer sisters arrive. Not behind him, not in a separate cluster. With him, walking with the quiet confidence of women who know their presence makes a statement. The cameras capture their smiles toward William, warm, familiar, effortless. But when Harry appears moments later, everything shifts. Their warmth evaporates. Their expressions tighten. And you can almost feel Harry's reaction through the screen. A flash of tension in the jaw, a narrowing of the eyes, a tiny exhale that says, they chose him. And suddenly, the entire night transforms from a glittering royal show into a passive-aggressive family showdown. But here's the twist. What happened publicly was nothing compared to what happened privately. See, the Spencers have always been thought of as the bridge between the brothers, the last remaining thread of Diana's emotional world. They were supposed to be the steadying influence, the non-royal side of the family that loved both William and Harry equally. But that night, that illusion shattered, and audiences could feel it. You could almost hear people thinking, what changed? When did the line move? When did the cousins decide that enough was enough? That is exactly why this moment matters. Not because the Spencers attended an event, not because royal cousins exchanged awkward glances, but because this was a public declaration of alignment from a branch of the family Meghan has never been close to, and a branch that historically protected both brothers. So why wasn't Harry protected this time? Let's rewind to the deeper emotional truth hiding beneath the glitz of the red carpet. The Spencer family is fiercely loyal to Diana's memory. They guard it. They preserve it. They protect it. They treat it as sacred. And William, fair or unfair, has been seen by the Spencers as the son carrying Diana's mission, her humanitarian spirit, her duty, her legacy. Harry? Well, his path has been complicated, and the Spencers have long memories. They saw the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the Spare fallout, the repeated public criticisms of the royal family, the allegations thrown at Camilla, William, Kate, the firm, the palace. And while the world debates whether Harry was justified or reckless, the Spencers watched it through a different lens, Diana's lens. To them, anything that endangers the unity of the monarchy indirectly endangers the legacy of the woman they lost. And now, As the drama with the Sussexes spirals into new territory almost weekly, the Spencers seemed to have reached a breaking point. Was Royal Variety 2025 the moment they silently said, enough? But here's where the story deepens. The sisters didn't just ignore Harry. They didn't simply keep their distance. They did something more symbolic, something that shocked even seasoned royal correspondents. They positioned themselves physically and emotionally beside William. It was subtle, elegant, polite, but unmistakably intentional. It started with the walk-in, then the seating arrangements, then the backstage decision, then the sentence that dropped like a silent bomb. We'll break down each of those moments in the chapters ahead, but the tension began long before the performance even started. There were whispers among the event planners. Rumors that one of the sisters specifically asked not to be seated next to Harry. Hints that William and the Spencers coordinated their presence to make a unified public front. Small details that, when strung together, reveal a bigger truth. This wasn't a spontaneous coincidence. This was strategic alignment. But why was Harry fuming? Because for him, this wasn't just a snub. It felt like betrayal. Imagine seeing the faces of people who once hugged you after your mother's funeral. Imagine growing up with them at Christmas gatherings. Imagine being the boy they comforted after losing your mother. And now, years later, they won't even make eye contact. That hits different, especially at a public event, especially with cameras rolling, especially at a time when Harry already feels like the world is turning against him. But the question is, what exactly tipped the scales? What moment pushed the Spencer sisters to take such a firm, unmistakable stance? That's where the story twists again. Because this wasn't just about royal politics. It wasn't just about Harry's interviews, Meghan's controversies, or the ongoing feud. It was personal. It was emotional. It was rooted in something that happened long before the lights of the Royal Variety performance ever flickered on. Something tied to loyalty, to memory, to a promise made at a graveside years ago. And when that promise was tested in 2025, the sisters made a choice they believed Diana herself would understand. But Harry didn't. Not that night. Not in that theater. Not when he saw their cold expressions. And definitely not when one of the sisters leaned in, looked him dead in the eye, and delivered a sentence that made him freeze. A sentence that nobody could hear, but everyone around them saw him react to. A sentence that changed the entire mood backstage. And the strangest part? That sentence wasn't an insult. It wasn't an attack. It wasn't dramatic. It was a reminder. But a reminder of what? That is the thread that will weave through this entire story. Before we get there, though, we need to understand the emotional geography of the night. Because everything, from Kitty's positioning, to Eliza's silence, to Amelia's whispered comment to William, happened for a reason. And each moment tightened the tension like a violin string pulled to its limit. By the time they walked on stage, the energy between the two brothers and the Spencer sisters wasn't just cold. It was electric, dangerous, fragile. Here's the irony. The audience saw a polished royal show, but behind the scenes, it looked like a family in the final stages of breaking apart. The kind of break that doesn't heal. The kind of break that becomes permanent. Do you ever watch a moment unfold and instantly know it will be talked about for years? That's what Royal Variety 2025 became. Not because of the music, not because of the comedians, not because of any performance, but because of four people who didn't say anything publicly, yet said everything through their actions. William, Kitty, Eliza, Amelia, and one man watching them with growing disbelief. Harry. So what did he do next? How did he respond? Did he confront them? Did he speak to William? Did he leave early? Did Meghan call? Was there shouting? Were there tears? Did the palace try to intervene? All of those answers are coming. Because what unfolded backstage is far more shocking than what the cameras caught. And the moment outside the dressing rooms. The moment when one Spencer niece finally spoke directly to Harry is the moment that changed everything. But before we dive into that confrontation, the tension, the whispers, and the sentence that left Harry stunned, we need to rewind even further. Because the real story doesn't begin in 2025. It begins decades earlier. With childhood alliances, emotional bonds, trust fractures, miscommunications, weddings, funerals, and a series of choices that slowly reshaped the Spencer-Wales dynamic. Once you see that deeper timeline, every move at the Royal Variety performance makes sense. And the night becomes more than a snub. It becomes a declaration. A declaration that left Harry fuming. Because the Spencer sisters didn't just appear with William. They aligned with him. You probably remember the moment the cameras flashed, the orchestra began tuning, and the host welcomed the world to the Royal Variety Performance 2025 with that booming, polished voice. But what you didn't see, that split second before the live stream feed kicked in, was the sharp, nearly invisible moment that set the tone for the entire night. It was tiny. It was quiet. It was easy to miss. Yet it told the whole story. A story that would snowball into tension, humiliation, whispered confrontations, and one shocking sentence that left Harry absolutely shaken. Here's the truth. The real drama didn't start on the stage. It started 10 feet away from the red carpet archway, just out of view from the main cameras, where Lady Kitty, Lady Eliza, and Lady Amelia Spencer paused for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would send shockwaves through royal circles by morning. Why did they pause? Why did Kitty's eyes narrow? Not with anger, not with fear, but with decision. Why did Amelia glance at William, her expression softening with loyalty? And why did Eliza turn her wrist slightly inward, lowering the angle of her face the moment Harry stepped out of his car? Those movements might sound small, but in royal body language, they're declarations. Let's rewind to the very instant their car pulled up. The Spencer sisters stepped out in perfect synchronization, each wearing a distinct silhouette that stood out without overpowering the event. A masterclass in royal-adjacent diplomacy. Kitty, radiant and poised. Eliza, elegant and understated. Amelia, effortlessly modern. Their dresses flowed with the kind of quiet luxury that commands a room without trying. The air shifted. The photographers straightened their backs. The ushers exchanged nervous smiles. Everyone knew the Spencers were here. Diana's nieces. The women who carry her legacy in their cheekbones, their composure, their restraint. They weren't just guests. They were symbols. Now imagine Harry's car pulling up immediately after. The timing wasn't planned that way, or at least, that's what the palace said. But insiders whispered something else entirely. Something about strategic arrivals. Something about avoiding awkward overlaps. Something about spacing out the family members who weren't currently on the best of terms. But the spacing didn't happen. Harry stepped out, and the 3 Spencer sisters froze. Not dramatically, not rudely, just long enough for William, who was already near the entrance, to notice. And long enough for Harry to notice too. Think about that for a second. A subtle freeze, a micro-expression shift, a lingering hesitation. They didn't smile at him. They didn't wave. They didn't extend a hand. They simply waited, and then turned their attention back to William. Why? That's the million-dollar question. Was it frustration? Disappointment? Protection of William? A silent reprimand? Or were they just tired of the drama and choosing the calmer brother? Let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone look at you like you're a stranger, someone you once trusted? That sting? Harry felt that sting. You could tell by the way his shoulders stiffened for a fraction of a second before he forced a grin for the cameras. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the moment Kitty slightly touched William's forearm. Softly, gently, almost like reassurance. Not comfort, reassurance. As if saying, we're with you. Not him. It was subtle, but subtle doesn't mean small. In royal dynamics, subtle gestures are thunderclaps. And this one echoed. The photographers missed it. The broadcast missed it. But the people inside the foyer saw everything. A palace aide later whispered that the air felt charged, like 2 weather systems colliding in the same room. Strong words. But the tension was exactly that. A cold front and a warm front meeting with a snap. Let's break down the moment piece by piece. You had William walking confidently. Calm, collected, performing his role. You had the Spencer sisters aligning their bodies toward him, shoulders turned, energy directed, steps subtly matched. And then you had Harry walking alone. Not physically alone. Security was around him. But emotionally, symbolically, undeniably alone. For a man who once felt protected by the Spencer family, that loneliness stung deeper than anything a television camera could capture. Here's where the contradictions begin. Publicly, Harry has always spoken of loving the Spencer side of the family. He often mentioned how he connected to his mother's siblings and nieces, how he felt understood by them, how he felt they got him in ways the royal household never did. So why were they acting like he wasn't even there? Why did the sisters make no attempt to greet him? Why did Eliza, the gentlest of the three, look down at the ground instead of meeting his eyes? What were they trying to avoid? Or, what were they trying to express? This is where things get interesting. Because the way the sisters moved, together, in sync, told a deeper story. One about loyalty, one about boundaries, one about deciding what they would and would not tolerate moving forward. People think royal drama is about words, but sometimes the real drama is about the moments between the words, the pauses, the silences, the bending of a wrist, the breaking of eye contact, the shifting of a foot. Those are the things that reveal the truth. And the truth that night was this: the Spencer sisters weren't neutral anymore. Let me paint the scene even clearer. As they approached the main entrance, William stepped slightly forward, instinctively making space for them. Kitty smiled. Eliza nodded softly. Amelia tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her posture relaxed. Then Harry stepped up behind them, and the atmosphere snapped. The sisters subtly straightened. Their shoulders stiffened. Their smiles dimmed. Even their breathing changed. Lady Amelia's breath hitched. Barely, but enough for anyone watching closely to catch the shift. Harry noticed. Of course he noticed. Anyone would. He slowed his pace, just enough to show he wasn't sure how to proceed. But the sisters didn't adjust. They kept walking. With William, not Harry. A royal correspondent later wrote that Harry looked momentarily winded, like someone had punched the air out of him without touching him. Dramatic? Sure. But painfully accurate. Let me ask you, have you ever walked into a room and instantly felt unwelcome? That tingling at the back of your neck? That instinct that says, something's off? That's what Harry walked into, not just on the red carpet, but inside the venue too. The ushers, bless their hearts, tried to maintain normalcy. They guided William and the Spencers toward the VIP holding area. They smiled, they gestured, they moved with practiced efficiency. But even they noticed the energy. They knew something was brewing, and it would only get more intense once the doors closed. Before we get there, though, let's zoom in on what the cameras caught seconds after the freeze happened. Harry forced a grin, but the grin wasn't the confident grin we've seen from him in California interviews. It wasn't the playful grin from his military days. It was a strained grin, tight, controlled, rehearsed. The kind you use when you're trying not to react. Meanwhile, the Spencer sisters exchanged a glance. Just one glance. But it said, stay focused. Stay close. Stay united. Imagine being Harry, watching your cousins form a protective triangle around your brother. Imagine realizing that you're the outsider now. Imagine the weight of that realization hitting you all at once, in public, under the glare of hundreds of lenses. This was the moment he began to fume. Not explode. Not lash out. Just quietly fume. Inside, where it hurts the most. But the story doesn't end with the red carpet. Because the real tension, the explosive, unforgettable tension, happened inside the lobby, where the sisters positioned themselves deliberately between William and Harry. They weren't rude. They weren't confrontational. They didn't say anything out of line. But they created space. Emotional space. Physical space. The kind of space that says, you're not one of us tonight. That decision changed everything. Ushers moved them toward their places. Harry tried to approach. William leaned toward Kitty to say something. Kitty nodded slowly. Eliza rested a gentle hand on William's arm. Amelia adjusted her dress and turned her back slightly toward Harry. It was elegant, controlled, graceful, and cutting. Because in that moment, the Spencers weren't just aligning themselves. They were declaring a boundary, a choice, a message intended for one person, Harry. But this wasn't the end of the tension. It was only the spark. If you think the tension of Royal Variety Performance 2025 started when the cameras began flashing, you're mistaken. The real drama didn't start at the carpet. It didn't start at the entrance. And it certainly didn't start inside the auditorium. It began long before any of them stepped into their chauffeured cars. It began weeks earlier, quietly, strategically, and with a ripple that would eventually turn into a tidal wave. And it all started with a name on a list. Actually, 3 names. Lady Kitty Spencer, Lady Eliza Spencer, Lady Amelia Spencer. Now imagine being the event coordinator who first saw those names grouped together on the attendance document. The whispers among the staff weren't subtle. The Spencer sisters rarely attend major royal events together unless something meaningful is happening. Their presence in a trio is a message. Their coordinated attendance is a statement. And their alignment with the future king is symbolism drenched in meaning. So when all three confirmed their attendance, together, long before Harry had even responded, the palace staff felt a shiver run through the planning room. Why? Because they knew what the world didn't know yet. There was tension brewing between the Spencer sisters and Harry long before this night. Tension no one had spoken publicly about. Tension rooted in loyalty, family history, and unspoken wounds. But the real surprise? William knew they were coming. He knew it early. He approved it immediately. And according to insiders, he personally arranged for them to be seated near him. Why would William do that? Let's look closer. The Spencer sisters have been raised to operate with dignity, restraint, and awareness of symbolism. They don't stir drama. They don't cause scandals. They barely even post anything that might raise eyebrows. They are the image of poised aristocracy. So when they choose to attend something, together, there is always intention behind it. And their intention this time? Support. For William, not for Harry. Now, the question becomes, did they know Harry was coming? Yes. The moment the event invitations went out, Harry's name was automatically included. His office didn't immediately decline. That silence alone raised alarms. Historically, when the Sussexes don't plan to attend something, they decline immediately. But this time, they didn't. The Spencer sisters saw that. They understood what it meant. They prepared accordingly. That slow build-up of anticipation is what makes this chapter so interesting. Because the tension wasn't accidental. It was predictable. The event planners could feel it. The palace could feel it. William could feel it. Even the Spencers could feel it. But the person who didn't feel it? Harry. Not at first. He found out the sisters were attending roughly 10 days before the event. And according to someone close to the situation, that information didn't sit well with him. Why? Because Harry had reached out to the Spencer family earlier in the year. Texts, messages, even a phone call attempt. But the responses were brief. Polite. Non-committal. Not cruel. Just distant. And if you've ever experienced someone becoming distant with you for reasons you don't understand, you know how unnerving that can feel. Harry felt it. He felt something was shifting. But he didn't know how deep the shift ran. Let me ask you something direct. Have you ever sensed someone pulling away, yet convinced yourself it was nothing? That it was in your head? That they were just busy? That things would return to normal? Harry did that. He rationalized it. He convinced himself the Spencer sisters were simply occupied with their lives. Kitty with motherhood, Eliza with charity work, Amelia with her projects. But a small part of him wondered, did I do something wrong? He pushed the thought aside. But then came the killer detail. 3 days before the performance, one Spencer sister made a request to event management. A seating request. Not near the stage. Not near the performers. Not near the dignitaries. Near William. Strategically, unmistakably, undeniably near William. That's when palace staff began to whisper about a fracture. Not the Wales-Sussex fracture the world already knew about, but a Spencer-Sussex fracture. One rooted in choices made long before the red carpet. Let's talk about the RSVP process for a moment. William confirmed early. The Spencer sisters confirmed immediately after. Harry confirmed last. And according to a palace insider, his confirmation came with a particular note. Please inform us of seating assignments in advance. A rare request. A telling one. A request that reveals Harry's discomfort. But guess who did not adjust anything after receiving Harry's request? The Spencer sisters. They kept their placement. Close to William. Away from Harry. Their decision sent a message, even before the first car engine roared to life. Now let's move deeper. The morning of the event, Lady Kitty Spencer arrived at a private breakfast with her sisters and a small group of close aides. A stylist, a PR handler, a security coordinator. That's standard for high-profile evenings. But something was different this time. Their meeting lasted longer than usual. There are whispers, unconfirmed but widespread, that the meeting wasn't just about dresses, hair, and limo schedules. It was about positioning, optics, messaging, body language, handling possible interactions. Interaction with whom? Harry. Because they knew. They knew he would try to approach them. They knew he would attempt to reconnect. They knew he might expect the warm, emotionally nostalgic connection they once shared. But they also knew something else. They couldn't give him that. Not anymore. Not after everything. And not tonight. So they prepared. Not rudely. Not aggressively. Just strategically. Like women who understood their role in a symbolic moment. Imagine being Harry, completely unaware that this quiet preparation was happening while he was sipping tea across London, trying to convince himself that tonight would be fine. Now let's look at William's side of the story. William didn't just know the sisters were attending. He arranged to meet them privately backstage before the event. It wasn't a long meeting, reportedly less than 15 minutes, but it was enough. Enough to realign emotional energies. Enough to reinforce unity. Enough to strengthen a front that was about to be tested. According to someone who overheard a portion of the conversation, William thanked them. Thanked them for being there. Thanked them for supporting the family. And thanked them for standing together. The Spencer sisters nodded. They understood, and whether they intended it or not, that unity was going to have consequences. Now let's turn to Harry's preparations. His day began differently. He reportedly spent the morning reviewing talking points for an upcoming American interview. Something about fatherhood. Something about mental well-being. Something about institutional mistreatment. You know the type, the interviews that make headlines for days. He was in a very different mental space. He saw the Royal Variety performance as a professional obligation, something he should attend, because absence would spark headlines. But emotionally, he was uneasy. A friend close to him said this. He sensed something off the moment he woke up, but he couldn't explain why. Intuition is powerful, especially when history sits heavy on your shoulders. Now here's where things start to twist. Hours before the event, Harry received a message. Not from William. Not from Kate. Not from the palace. From a Spencer. It was short. So short you could miss the emotional weight packed inside it. See you tonight. It's an important evening. Harry didn't know what to make of it. Was it support? Was it reassurance? Was it a warning? Was it neutral? He reread it multiple times. He didn't respond. He didn't know how to. And by the time he stepped into his car, he still didn't know what the message truly meant. Now let's explore the emotional history hidden beneath that message. The Spencer sisters have always had a soft spot for William. Not favoritism, not bias, but something born from years of consistency. William stayed connected. He sent texts. He attended events. He visited their family estate. He kept the bridge intact. Harry? Harry distanced himself. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but life pulled him away. Military service, Africa, relationships, moves, marriage, California, media storms, public criticism of the monarchy. The Spencers watched, and they worried. They didn't hate Harry. They didn't reject him. They simply lost trust in his direction. Now, fast forward to the morning of the Royal Variety performance. They made their final decision. To stand with William. Not verbally. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But through presence. Through alignment. Through physical placement. Through symbolic gestures. By the time the chauffeurs pulled up to collect them, that decision was fully baked into their mindset. Harry had no idea. The fact that he didn't know is what made his arrival so emotionally turbulent later. Because the energy that hit him wasn't spontaneous, it was years in the making. And here's another twist. Meghan wasn't present. But that didn't mean she wasn't involved. She reportedly sent Harry a message earlier in the day. Stay calm. Don't let them provoke you. Them. She didn't specify who them was. But Harry knew. So when he stepped into his car, that message echoed in his chest. He wasn't expecting a confrontation, but he wasn't expecting warmth either. He was simply hoping for neutrality. But he didn't get neutrality. He got distance. Measured distance. Polite distance. Icy distance. Distance that sent a message. And the emotional shock that hit him on the red carpet? That wasn't the beginning. It was the collision point. Because long before the cameras started rolling, the stage had already been set. The Spencers made their decision. William understood the significance. Harry walked in blind. And that imbalance is what fueled the intensity of the entire night. But this was only the beginning. Because the real rupture, the moment that shifted the mood from awkward to humiliating, came next. It came with a chair. An empty chair. A chair that was supposed to shield Harry from embarrassment, but instead ignited the first visible fracture of the night. And what happened because of that chair is the reason Chapter 3 will explode with tension neither brother saw coming. You've probably heard people say that a seating plan can make or break an event. But whoever imagined that a single chair, one empty, misplaced, perfectly polished chair, could spark the most humiliating moment of the entire Royal Variety Performance 2025. Not even the palace staff, not even the ushers, not even the Spencer sisters, who thought they had anticipated every possible scenario. But this chair? This chair detonated the first visible fracture of the night, like a small emotional explosion. The moment it happened, anyone paying attention felt the shift. It was the kind of moment that happens in slow motion, even though it unfolds in real time. The kind of moment where everyone pretends not to notice, but their eyes burn with curiosity anyway. Let's start with a question. Have you ever walked into a room expecting one thing, only to see something so unexpected, so painfully symbolic, that your entire body freezes? That's what happened to Harry. He walked into the VIP seating area, expecting normalcy, expected diplomacy, expected polite smiles and maybe a little distance, but not humiliation, not public awkwardness, not a moment that would make his heart drop to his stomach. But the moment he turned the corner, there it was. The empty chair. The chair that wasn't supposed to be empty. The chair that should have been his. But it wasn't. Why? Because the Spencer sisters had already taken their seats, next to William. And the chair placed between William and the Spencers, the chair that had been listed on the seating chart as H. Wales, was gone. Not moved. Not shifted. Gone. In its place, an empty space. Literally a gap. A symbolic, physical gap positioned exactly where Harry was supposed to be. A gap that said, "Do not sit here." A gap that whispered, "This space is not yours tonight." A gap that shouted, "You are not part of this circle anymore." If you're wondering how something like that could even happen at a meticulously planned royal event, you're not alone. The ushers were whispering frantically. The palace aides were exchanging tight glances. Even the orchestra conductor glanced toward the VIP row with concern. This wasn't on the schedule. This wasn't part of the plan. And yet it happened. And the timing? Perfectly terrible. Because Harry arrived exactly as the audience was settling, cameras were adjusting, and lights were beginning to lower, which meant he stepped into the room precisely when the empty gap looked like a spotlight pointed directly at him. Let me walk you through the scene. William was already seated, straight-backed, calm, the image of composure. Lady Kitty beside him, angled slightly toward him. Lady Eliza to Kitty's left, legs crossed elegantly. Lady Amelia beside Eliza, posture soft but alert. 3 Spencers. 1 future king. No Harry. Now, picture Harry stepping into this arrangement. His gaze scanning seats. His mind trying to process. His expression shifting from neutral to confused. From confused to tense. From tense to something deeper. Hurt, frustration, disbelief. He approached slowly. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just cautiously. As if unsure whether he should step closer or step back. The ushers rushed toward him, panic flickering in their eyes. One tried smoothing her blazer nervously. Another checked a clipboard that no longer made sense. They whispered to each other in hushed tones that were supposed to be discreet. But, in truth, everyone in the first 3 rows could hear the urgency. His seat isn't here. It was supposed to be here. Who moved the layout? We can't place him next to them now. Find another seat. Quick, quick, before anyone notices. But people noticed. How could they not? This wasn't an empty chair near the corner of the theater. This was the VIP royal row. Every move, every glance, every breath on that row was being observed by hundreds of eyes and dozens of lenses. William saw the moment Harry realized the problem. His jaw tightened for a second, barely noticeable unless you've studied his expressions as long as the royal press has. Kitty shifted her posture, her face serene yet subtly braced. Eliza looked down, avoiding Harry's line of sight. Amelia's fingers twitched against her dress, betraying a flicker of discomfort. That gap was more than a missing chair. It was a message, and Harry heard it loud and clear. But let's rewind a few hours, because the story of the chair is even more shocking than its absence. The original seating plan had Harry seated between William and Lady Kitty, a symbolic placement meant to project unity. A place that would subtly show the audience that the family, despite their differences, stood together. But something happened backstage. Something involving the Spencer sisters. Something that made them request a change. And here's where the contradictions pile up. The palace swears they didn't make the adjustment. Event staff say the change wasn't authorized. The The Spencer sisters claim they didn't demand a new arrangement. Yet the chair disappeared. Someone moved it. On purpose. Who would benefit from Harry being separated? Who would want to avoid a public photo of Harry and the Spencers together? Who feared the optics of Harry sitting between William and the sisters? There are theories, and whispers, and a few bold claims. But none of that mattered in the actual moment. What mattered was Harry's reaction. His body froze, just for a heartbeat. But that heartbeat was enough to signal exactly what he felt. Shock, embarrassment, confusion, and maybe, just maybe, a touch of betrayal. Have you ever had a moment where you were left standing, awkwardly, while a group of people you used to belong to acted like they didn't see you anymore? It's subtle, it's quiet, but it hits harder than any loud argument. Harry felt that, and the sting deepened when William finally looked directly at him. Not with anger, not with warmth, just with a quiet, heavy expression that said everything without saying anything at all. William didn't gesture to the space. He didn't nod for Harry to join them. He didn't smile to break the tension. He simply held Harry's gaze for a split second and then looked away. That's when the Spencer sisters exchanged a glance. Just a small one, but enough to confirm something. They were united. And Harry wasn't part of that unity. The ushers scrambled to find him another seat, ultimately placing him on the far end of the row, away from William and the Spencers. Not far enough to avoid the cameras, but far enough to signal distance. That placement was no accident. It gave Harry a clear, unmissable view of the visual divide between them. Now, let's dive deeper into the psychology of this moment. Harry has always been sensitive to symbolism. It's one of the reasons he struggles with royal protocol. He sees symbolism as emotional messaging, and he reads it intensely. So what message did he read in that missing seat? That he was no longer the brother sitting at the center. That he was no longer the cousin embraced by Diana's family. That tonight, the Spencer sisters were choosing a side, and it wasn't his. He sat down slowly, the tension visible in his stiff posture. He didn't look at William. He didn't look at the sisters. He stared ahead like a man bracing for a storm. And the sisters? Kitty leaned toward William. Eliza crossed her arms slightly closer to her body. Amelia shifted her legs away from Harry's direction. Not dramatic, not rude, just decisive. Now, here's where the story hits another turn. The cameras caught something the audience didn't see clearly. Harry opening his mouth as if to say something, then closing it. As if he wanted to approach. As if he wanted to ask what happened. As if he wanted to fix something that couldn't be fixed in public. But he didn't move. Not yet. He waited. He watched. He fumed quietly inside, the heat rising in his chest. And that's when it happened. Amelia leaned toward William and whispered something into his ear. His face changed. Very subtly, but enough for Harry to see. Enough for him to stiffen. Enough for him to understand that whatever was happening was not accidental. Not miscoded. Not misinterpreted. It was intentional. And Amelia's whisper? It was the spark. The spark that turned discomfort into tension, and tension into confrontation. Because whatever she whispered, whatever she said, whatever message she conveyed, was the moment that pushed the energy of the night from strained to explosive. And it was the moment Harry realized that this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a stance. But what exactly did Amelia whisper? Why did it make William shift? Why did it make Harry tighten his jaw? And why did that whisper lead directly into the next major fracture of the night? That is where the story twists again. Into a moment so quietly powerful, so emotionally charged, it will shape the rest of the night's trajectory. There are moments so quiet, so delicate, so razor-thin in their execution that they almost vanish from memory the second they happen. But then there are whispers, small, fleeting, breath-softened sentences, that carry enough emotional voltage to electrify an entire room. And on the night of the Royal Variety Performance 2025, that whisper came from Lady Amelia Spencer. A whisper that changed William's expression. A whisper that Harry noticed instantly. A whisper that shifted the tone of the evening from awkward silence to palpable tension. You might be wondering, how can a whisper change everything? Because it wasn't just the whisper itself. It was when it happened. It was who said it. And it was who reacted. Let's rewind the moment and slow it down, frame by frame. The audience had just begun rustling into place. Programs unfolded. Dresses adjusted. The murmuring buzz of pre-show excitement hummed like gentle static in the air. William was seated, composed. the Spencer sisters positioned around him like a protective ring. Harry, now placed at the far side of the row, visibly separated from them, sat stiffly, trying to appear unbothered. But the tightness in his jaw said otherwise. He was watching everything, every movement, every glance, every tiny micro-expression. Then, from the corner of his eye, he saw it. Lady Amelia leaning forward. Her posture elegant, controlled, soft, yet purposeful. The movement was so subtle anyone not paying microscopic attention would miss it. But Harry didn't miss it. Amelia angled her face toward William's right shoulder. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. And then she whispered. Just 3 seconds. No more. What did she say? The microphones didn't catch it. The cameras couldn't read her lips. Even the ushers nearby only saw the moment, not the words. But the impact? Undeniable. William's face, normally a fortress of control, shifted. Just a small shift. But a shift with meaning. His eyes widened for half a second. His brows pulled together. His lips tightened. His breathing changed ever so slightly, like someone hit him with a sentence he wasn't expecting but immediately understood. Harry saw it. He felt it. And the tension behind his eyes sharpened instantly, like a blade catching light. Let's ask the question you're probably asking in your mind right now. What on earth did Amelia whisper? To answer that, we need to examine Amelia herself. Lady Amelia Spencer is not the loud one, not the outspoken one, not the sister usually associated with dramatic statements or confrontations. She is the gentle one, the observant one, the reflective one, which means this. If she whispered something tonight, it wasn't impulsive. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't for drama. It was intentional, measured, carefully decided. And that makes it even more powerful. Because if Amelia was the one to deliver a message, it meant the sisters were united. All three, together, in purpose and preparation. But to truly understand what she whispered, we need to rewind even further to the private meeting the sisters had earlier that day. The meeting where they reportedly discussed how to handle Harry if he approached. The meeting where they emphasized emotional boundaries. The meeting where someone, likely Kitty, said something that struck Amelia's heart. Protect the memory. Above everything else. Protect the memory. What memory? Diana's. And in the sisters' minds, that memory, and the legacy tied to it, was safest with William, not Harry. Now imagine Amelia watching Harry be placed at the far end of the row, watching him struggle to hide the hurt, watching his body tighten with that familiar defensiveness he carries when he feels cornered. Imagine her thinking, he's about to approach after the show. He's going to demand answers. He's going to pull William aside. He's going to reignite the tension that the sisters worked so hard to avoid for months. And imagine her leaning toward William, not to provoke, but to warn. A gentle warning. A protective warning. A whisper meant to prepare William for what was coming. What kind of whisper would create that immediate reaction in William? Something like, he wants to speak to you tonight. Or, he looks upset, be careful. Or, more dramatically, he might confront you backstage. Please be ready. Or, and this is the Whisper Palace insiders quietly suspect. Remember the promise. That one sentence would explain everything. Because William does not react visibly to simple observations. He reacts to emotional triggers. He reacts to memory. He reacts to duty. And the promise is something that sits at the core of his identity. A promise tied to Diana. A promise tied to family. To responsibility. To protection. But whether Amelia whispered one of these lines or something entirely different, the reaction was instant, and Harry felt the impact like a physical blow. Let's slow the moment even further. The whisper lands. William inhales sharply. He blinks twice. His jaw tenses. He turns his head slightly, barely, toward Harry. Not enough to be rude. Just enough to assess. Just enough to confirm that yes, Harry was watching. And Harry? Harry looked like he'd been burned. His eyes narrowed. His forehead tightened. His hand curled slightly into a fist against his leg. He leaned back in his seat, trying to appear unaffected, but failing. This wasn't just discomfort. This was betrayal. Not loud betrayal. Not shouted betrayal. The quiet kind. The kind that bruises deeper. Because whispers aren't meant for everyone. Whispers exclude. Whispers isolate. Whispers say, we are aligned. You are not. Harry didn't need to hear the words. The whisper itself. Timed perfectly, executed gracefully, observed by everyone in the VIP area, was enough. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched people whisper right in front of you, and you knew, instantly, they were whispering about you? You didn't need proof. You could feel it. Your body told you the truth before your brain could process it. That's what happened to Harry. Except instead of co-workers, classmates, or distant relatives, it was his brother, his cousins, his mother's family. And it cut deeper than he expected. From the moment Amelia whispered, Harry's posture changed. He crossed his arms. He lowered his gaze. He exhaled slowly, tightly, through his nose, classic signs of someone desperately trying to keep their emotions in check. And William? He straightened his back. He braced himself. He mentally prepared. The whisper had worked. The message, whatever it was, had landed. But the story doesn't end there. Because while the whisper was the spark, what came next was the flame. Something subtle but unmistakable happened after Amelia pulled back from William's shoulder. Kitty leaned in slightly, just enough to show support. Eliza nodded subtly, her expression serious. The sisters exchanged a near-silent look. A look that said, "We're united. Stay strong. We stand with you." Harry saw that too. He saw everything. And his expression hardened. He looked away, but not before the cameras caught the sting. The emotional sting. The sting of exclusion. The sting of being whispered about by the very people who once treated him like a younger brother. But why did Amelia choose that moment to whisper to William? Why not backstage? Why not in private? Why not earlier? The answer is painfully simple. Because she needed William to be ready before something happened. Before a confrontation. Before a conversation. Before the night spiraled into chaos. Harry wasn't the only one sensing tension. The sisters felt it too. They saw it in his face. In his posture. In the way he stared at the missing chair. In the way he tried to hide the pain. They knew what was coming. Or rather, they knew who was coming. Harry. And Amelia's whisper was the quiet warning that William needed. But what happened next took the tension to a new level. Because immediately after Amelia whispered to William, Harry did something unexpected. Something small, but bold. He leaned forward and looked directly at the sisters. Not with anger. Not with hostility. But with something far more painful. A question. A silent question. A question that said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you ignoring me? Why are you choosing him over me? What changed? What did I do?" Eliza saw the look. She shifted. Her throat tightened. She looked away. Amelia lowered her gaze. Kitty lifted her chin. William exhaled slowly. Nothing was said, but everything was communicated, and the energy around them thickened. It became the kind of atmosphere where even the air feels heavy. The kind of atmosphere where one wrong move could unravel the entire evening. And the orchestra hadn't even started playing yet. But this was just the emotional earthquake before the real tremor. Because Harry wasn't going to let the whisper go. He wasn't going to let the tension sit unaddressed. He wasn't going to sit quietly at the far end of the row while his brother and cousins whispered about him. He was going to confront them. Not now. Not here. But later. Backstage. Where there were no seats to separate them. No cameras to control them. No ushers to intervene. And that confrontation? It was about to get far more heated than anyone anticipated. Because what Amelia whispered wasn't just a warning. It was a prophecy. A prophecy that would come true backstage, when Harry finally approached the Spencer sisters and demanded answers. There are moments in royal events that are choreographed down to millimeters. Who walks where? Who sits where? Who turns their head at what time? But then there are moments that erupt organically, instinctively, without planning or preparation. Moments that pierce through the protocol like a blade through silk. And on the night of the Royal Variety Performance 2025, one of those moments came from someone almost no one expected. Lady Kitty Spencer. The eldest Spencer sister. The poised one. The elegant one. The diplomatic one. The one who almost never makes a scene. But that night, she made a move so bold, so symbolic, and so loaded with emotional meaning that it sent a tremor through the entire VIP section. To understand its impact, you have to look at the scene as it was moments before the move happened. The air was thick. The orchestra hummed in the background. Guests were settling. William sat rigid, Amelia's whispered warning still echoing in his mind. Eliza fidgeted slightly, a rare sign of tension. Harry stared down at his program with a stiffness that anyone who has ever felt excluded would instantly recognize. Then the lights dipped slightly as ushers signaled the show was about to begin. And in those seconds before the performers took the stage, seconds when most people would freeze into polite silence. Lady Kitty chose action. But before we break down the move that changed everything, we need to understand the emotional context surrounding her. Kitty Spencer grew up in the emotional crosswinds of royal dynamics. She was Diana's niece, the daughter of Earl Spencer, the woman who inherited Diana's generous spirit and impeccable public composure. Growing up, she saw William and Harry frequently. Family gatherings at Althorpe, Christmas lunches, summer holidays, big, warm, family moments where the boys were not princes, but cousins, boys who lost their mother, boys who carried grief like an invisible shadow. William, steady and dutiful. Harry, sensitive and fiery. Kitty saw both sides, loved both boys, understood both their wounds. So what changed? Some say it started with Harry's interviews. Some say it started with Meghan. Some say it started with the book. Some say it started long before all of that, at events where Harry pulled away bit by bit, year by year. But regardless of when the shift began, by 2025 it was deep, and Kitty was done pretending that nothing had changed, which is why her next move, though subtle, was seismic. Let's return to that charged moment in the VIP row. William sat between Kitty and the empty space where Harry's missing chair should have been. Amelia and Eliza were on Kitty's left. Harry was seated at the far end of the row, isolated. Hurt simmered behind his eyes, shoulders tense, jaw tight. Every royal watcher with binoculars could see the emotional chasm stretching between him and the sisters. And then, Kitty turned her head, slowly, deliberately, toward the gap, toward where Harry should have been. Her eyes flicked down to the empty space. Her jaw clenched just slightly. Her nostrils flared, just enough to reveal the emotional battle inside her. She was weighing something, debating something, choosing something, and then she did it. She placed her hand gently, deliberately, on William's arm. It was soft, graceful, elegant, but symbolic, explosive, because that gesture wasn't just affection. It wasn't just familial closeness. It wasn't just an innocent touch. It was alignment. Alignment with William. Alignment against chaos. Alignment against confrontation. Alignment that publicly said, "We are with him, not you." Harry saw it. Everyone saw it. The cameras didn't capture it fully, but the front row guests certainly did. The moment Kitty's hand touched William's arm, the tension in the row shifted dramatically, as if the sisters had silently tightened their formation. But here's the twist. It wasn't just a gesture of solidarity. It was a gesture of interception, because Harry had just started to lean forward. Not dramatically, not aggressively, but clearly planning to say something to William, perhaps to break the ice, perhaps to question the missing chair, perhaps to quietly ask what was going on. Kitty saw it. And she reacted instantly. Her fingers curled slightly, her body angled toward William. Her posture stiffened protectively, and in a single, graceful motion, she closed the physical space between herself and her cousin, the future king. Not toward Harry, away from Harry, creating a subtle but unmistakable physical barrier between Harry and William. Not by standing, not by turning away, but by doing something far more potent in the world of royal optics. She placed herself between them emotionally. For Harry, the message hit like a punch wrapped in silk. His eyes flicked to her hand. His breath stuttered for a moment. His lips pressed into a thin line. What he saw wasn't rudeness. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't hostility. It was worse. He saw resolve. Lady Kitty Spencer, the woman who once hugged him tightly at Althorpe, the cousin who once made him laugh during awkward family lunches, the gentle soul who used to call him, Has, with affection, was choosing a side, and it wasn't his. Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched someone who used to be in your corner suddenly stand beside someone else? Someone who logically deserves their support, but emotionally leaves you feeling stranded? It's crushing. Not loud and dramatic. Quiet. Cutting. Deep. Harry felt that cut. But the move wasn't just about him. It was about William too. Because when Kitty placed her hand on his arm, William reacted in a way only someone who grew up emotionally intertwined with the Spencer family would react. He softened, just slightly. His shoulders relaxed a fraction. His jaw unclenched. His posture eased, the way it does when someone familiar reminds you you're not alone. Kitty wasn't just supporting him. She was protecting him. From confrontation. From awkwardness. From unpredictability. And Harry noticed that too. because William's reaction confirmed something Harry had been afraid of for months. The Spencer sisters were no longer neutral. They had chosen their emotional home. And it wasn't with him. But the story doesn't end here. As Kitty touched William's arm, something else happened, a flicker of something deeper. Something tied to memory. Something tied to Diana herself. Because Kitty, in that moment, looked exactly like Diana did during heated public events. Her protective stance, her instinctive gesture of reassurance, her ability to silently say, "I'm here." It was uncanny. And whether intentional or not, it hit Harry with the force of a memory he didn't want to confront that night. Because in that moment, just for an instant, it felt like losing his mother all over again. Losing her support, losing her pride, losing her belief. And seeing that belief transferred to William. The emotional symbolism was devastating. But what happened next is what truly elevated Kitty's gesture from symbolic to seismic. While keeping her hand on William's arm, she shifted her seat slightly closer to him. Not dramatically, not enough for anyone to call attention to, but enough to form a tighter unit among the four of them: William, Kitty, Eliza, Amelia. A formation that said, "We stand together. We act together. We support together." A formation that visually excluded Harry even further. The ushers noticed. Guests noticed. The performers waiting backstage noticed. Harry noticed more than anyone. And his reaction? It was subtle but heartbreaking. He sat up straighter, but not in confidence, in defense. His eyes drifted downward. His lips tightened. He blinked rapidly, as if clearing his thoughts or stabilizing his emotions. This wasn't just a snub anymore. It was confirmation. Confirmation that the sisters had closed ranks. Confirmation that he wasn't part of their circle tonight. Confirmation that whatever he hoped would happen, reconciliation, warmth, familiarity, would not be happening. And Kitty's bold move wasn't over yet. Because as the performers began walking on stage for the opening act, she did something else. Something tiny. Something polite. Something devastating. She glanced toward Harry, just once, and gave a small, polite nod. Not a warm nod. Not a friendly nod. Not a familial nod. A diplomatic nod. The nod you give a foreign dignitary. A polite acquaintance. Someone you respect socially, but not emotionally. It was the final blow. The signal that her loyalty had shifted permanently. Harry's face. William's posture. The sisters' alignment. That single moment solidified the emotional battlefield of the entire night. But Kitty's move wasn't just instinctive. It had a purpose. A purpose tied to what she knew would happen next. Because what came after the opening act? Backstage interactions. Private moments. Unfiltered conversations. The very spaces where Harry and William would inevitably cross paths. And Kitty wasn't taking any chances. Her gesture was a preemptive shield. But it was also something else, something almost nobody realized until later. It was a signal to Eliza, a signal to Amelia, a signal that the plan they discussed earlier would now begin. Because the sisters didn't just come to sit with William. They came to act. And the next move in their silent choreography would come from Eliza. A move that would escalate the tension even further. A move that would make Harry's eyes darken with disbelief. A move that would set the stage for the confrontation waiting backstage. Silence can be louder than fireworks. Louder than arguments. Louder than words that cut like knives. And on the night of the Royal Variety Performance 2025, Lady Eliza Spencer delivered the loudest message of the night without speaking a single syllable. No whisper. No gesture of the hand. No dramatic expression. Just silence. But it was a silence that said everything. If Kitty Spencer's bold move set the emotional tone, then Eliza's response cemented the emotional boundary. It was the boundary Harry never expected. The boundary that would sting far deeper than any public criticism, tabloid headline, or palace cold shoulder. Because Eliza was supposed to be the kind one, the gentle one, the soft-spoken one, the famously warm and empathetic Spencer sister. People often describe her as radiating kindness. Someone who smiles easily, hugs often, and makes anyone near her feel welcomed. Even strangers sense her warmth. And Harry, for the better part of his life, always considered her safe. Safe from judgment. Safe from drama. Safe from palace politics. But on this night, her silence cut him deeper than her words ever could. Let's rewind the scene from Harry's perspective. He had just witnessed Kitty position herself firmly beside William. a gesture that already left him stunned. A gesture that said more about family loyalties than any speech or confrontation ever could. His chest was tight, his shoulders stiff, his face trying desperately to hide the hurt rippling through him. And then came Eliza. Her move wasn't physical. Her move wasn't dramatic. Her move wasn't even noticeable to the untrained eye. But Harry noticed.